Good morning, everyone. Jim Laird joining you from Grand Pacifica, Nicaragua. Had a nice little walk on the beach this morning. Did a little Instagram live down there. Probably didn't see it because I'm in Instagram jail, but oh well. It's a beautiful day here. It's been a little windy, so I've had to back up a little bit here towards the wall and see if I can shelter myself from the wind a little bit. But the weather's been gorgeous here. We've got a couple things going on. So tomorrow, today is Wednesday. If you're listening on the podcast, we do these live. So if the dates are all messed up, that's why. Tomorrow we'll be doing our weekly class that we add to our Fundamentals of Wellness master class. We'll be doing that tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. And it's basically strength training secrets, we're calling it. And Dr. Stillman's essentially going to interview me about basic strength training. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of how I approach people, athletes in general, and give you some general principles and some general tips, just so you can kind of navigate things for yourself. And then Saturday, we're doing Dr. Stillman's doing a webinar that's live. The one tomorrow, you got to get on our email list, stillmanwellness.com. And you'll get an email tonight with the link to that so you can register for it. We've got over 100 people registered for it. And it's a straight up class. It's not a sales webinar or anything like that. And then on Saturday, we're doing a webinar basically on how to train a little bit smarter and not just beat the crap out of yourself. Though hard training is good, but if you approach it in a smart way, you're going to get a lot better results out of it. It's good to train hard and smart. And to rest really hard. Most people don't. I used to have on the back of my shirt, I used to have rest more, because most people really, really don't do a good job with the rest component of their training. So we'll be getting into more detail on this stuff tomorrow and on Saturday as well, if you want to tune in for those, because there's so much you can cover. And here's the problem too today. Most people's general lack of most people have horrible GPP, general physical preparedness. They haven't worked on a farm. They haven't done manual labor. So overall, they're just not in very good condition. So really, the vast majority of athletes, if they just did some real basic, simple things, would see a nice improvement. The problem is a lot of people go way beyond where they need to be too quickly. Particularly with a lot of the young athletes that play things like football, they just go all out into powerlifting and they really drive the strength application really hard, really fast, which, works for some, but then others end up getting in a lot of trouble. So when I look at an athlete, when they walk in, one, I'm separating people into like categories. Like, okay, is this a general population? Is this like a 67-year-old person that wants to play with their grandkids on the floor? Is this an athlete, like somebody who's runner, or a certain type of athlete? I usually get people that have absolutely, I got a couple extremes. I've got people that are older, because I've trained a lot of people that were older. So they would refer people to me that were older, and we would start out nice and slow. So I would pick up these people that had let themselves go, and their friend had come and started working with me, and they're like, I feel so much better. I'm only training twice a week. It's made a huge difference in my life. I'm doing a little simple circuit every day at home, and I'm walking every day, and I feel like a new person. Those are the kind of people I would get referred to me. Then I would get the person that, destroyed their knee marathon running, or they had a slap tear in their hip capsule from lifting, or they had, or they hurt their back lifting, or they were competing in powerlifting or competing in a sport and they hurt themselves, so they needed somebody to help them get back into the swing of things. So that's a lot of what I did too. And then I would get, of course, I earned a pretty good reputation from working with ladies of getting really great aesthetic goals, getting women to look better, feel better by doing some, modified powerlifting program. Women respond really well to lifting weights. And so I would do some powerlifting. They would compete in a couple meets a year. We'd add some athletic things in that worked really, really well. That works incredibly well. and then I had my athletes, and most of my athletes were, most of them were athletes that hurt themselves because they didn't do a very good job uh, with their training volume and their training intensity. And then a lot of them I would get at a young age. You know, people would just see what I had done and looked at some of the other athletes, and I get them at a young age. So if I got an athlete or even just a regular person, one, I'm going to assess them when they come in. I'm going to see how they move. Are they a bouncy kind of person, or are they like more like a, like a, like a gorilla? Are they more like a kangaroo, or are they more like a gorilla, right? So if I got a kid who's naturally really, really strong to begin with, I'm going to still strength train them, but I'm not going to push them down that pathway. They need to be more reactive. They need to be more bouncy. We're going to start doing some things in their warm up that are get them more like bouncy and explosive and elasticy. I want to make sure that I give them enough of that bounce, because power is important and raw absolute strength is important. And then people that are really bouncy and laxy, we're going to do things to make them a little more stable. So a lot of it's going to depend on body structure, body type. And then I'm going to make sure that I do exercise. And I don't really use things like, I'll use a straight bar. I'll coach it a little differently. If somebody's got a straight bar, I'll have them, put it on their back, and I'll have them get their rib cage down so they're not arched really hard. I like front squats. I like exercise squats to start. I really like safety squat bar. I'll teach them how to back squat, but I do it in a way where they're passing a really hard arch. That's just with that. I see I'm kind of having some internet problems here. We're just going to keep going and see what happens. But I find that the traditional power lifts, except for maybe somebody like an offensive lineman, over time, I mean, you're going to have people that, oh yeah, okay, I did back squats, I got stronger, I got faster, which is great. But there's going to come a time where that specific exercise or the way it's done might not be what's needed to continue to do well. Like Tom Brady is a good example of this. Not everything Tom Brady did in his training, I think, was what we'd call optimal. But Tom Brady realized as he aged in his career, his training needed to be more about moving and about flowing and not about maximum strength. Early in his career, he lifted a lot of weights, and particularly with overhead athletes, you got to be really careful not to take away their ability to turn and rotate, right? And when you lift a lot of weights, you do a lot of heavy squats, heavy deadlifts, you take away somebody's ability to turn. And so Tom did a lot of really goofy things in his training, but the one thing he did was a lot of things where he was flowing and moving and shifting as opposed to creating this really stiff, immobile object, right? So kudos to Tom's trainer for putting some things in there that made him move and shift. A lot of the traditional powerlifting / bodybuilding type movements are not going to go well for somebody who throws overhead, right? That's why we're going to do things like landmine. Traditional bench press is not so hot, with the arch and the high compression. It's going to take away from the ability to move the thorax and get overhead. It might not. It might take a little while for that to affect their performance, but in the long run, it will. So one of the things Tom Brady did really well was incorporating more movement type things into his training to actually improve his throwing mechanics, right? Maximum strength or, force production for him is not a big thing. A lot of it is being able to move efficiently. So I look at athletes in that manner. And then the average person really, landmine is one of the best things you can do for just about anybody. It just puts everything in a really good position, particularly if your rib cage is stacked and your pelvis is stacked. That's a nice plane that it just is really friendly, and it makes the shoulder blade and the rib cage operate in a way that it's designed to move in. So when you do exercises that give you movement options, you're going to have better outcomes in the long run. Now, if your goal is to lift as much over your head as possible, there's different ways to do it, but that's going to take away from your ability to move well, which is eventually going to cause problems in the long run, right? So you kind of have to decide what you want. And that's the one thing people don't understand. It's like, you know, Bill Hartman talks about this all the time. You know, like my shoulder's bothering me. You know, I don't know what happened. And Bill will like look at his exercise selection and look at their body type and like, you know, you've got a shoulder result. You know, you did things in your training that basically ended up, you know, putting your shoulder in the position that ended up causing the problem for you. Yeah, so that's Dan. Yeah, Dan. Yeah, so Dan's a really good example. Dan in the comments there. Dan is a really strong, powerful guy like me. And he was doing a lot of the traditional bench pressing and traditional lifts. I was having a lot of pain throwing. And so we got him away from benching. We got him away from the traditional lifts. We got him doing more things where he was, you know, landmines, doing pull downs with a stacked rib cage, more things where he was rotating so he could move his thorax. And we were able to get him moving well enough where he could throw pain 3, you know, because he was a big meathead baseball player. And I've worked with a lot of baseball players and pitchers that fall in love with the weight room and it destroys them. You know, they get really strong on the bench and also when their elbow starts hurting on them to throw. And it's like, you got the rest of your life to be really strong if you want to be. But getting really, really strong in the weight room on bench press and things like that is not going to really help your baseball out, especially for a guy like Dan, who's built like me, who isn't really built to rotate well. So that's a prime example of kind of what I would do. But the normal everyday person that comes to me, which is the majority of the people I trained a lot of athletes. I still dealt with a lot of different athletes. I'm always looking for the most efficient way to make people better. You know, if I can make somebody better by improving their technique, by improving their sleep, their recovery, I'm always looking for low-hanging fruit. But the average person, if they do something I really like, you know, I really like foam rolling, not because it breaks up adhesions or anything like that. I like foam rolling because it makes people move around on the floor in weird ways. And that really helps people. It really, really helps people. Having people shift their guts around and roll and move around on the floor for 5 or 6 minutes, having somebody do a couple minutes of aerodyne, and then like a little circuit of like, I would do rope squats, maybe some static bear holds, some carries, something that's going to help them with the movements that are in the workout. Then you get into actual workout that you're doing. For the most people, I really like full body workouts, you know, pairing a squat with a press, you know, pairing a row with something different, you know, maybe after that you do like a step up with a row, pairing things together, and you do a couple different movements, and then you do some sort of quick finisher, a short aerodyne, maybe a little sled, and then you're doing a reset to cool off, to calm down, to get out of the high threshold breathing strategy, to calm yourself down, to recover. And that's basically, in a nutshell, what I would do with a normal person. But that all, you know, if you have somebody who hasn't trained in a long time, you know, I've got these mini circuits. I think if you type in feel good circuit on YouTube, you got these mini circuits that I would have people do something like that, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 times through, then maybe push the sled a few times and then go home for the first couple weeks, you know, and then you add some really simple things in. You teach them how to do the movement the first couple weeks. Whether it's a kettlebell deadlift or whatever it is. Week 1, you're just teaching the movement. You're training the nervous system to move. Week 2, you challenge them a little more. Week 3, week 4, week 5, week 6, all of a sudden they're lifting a decent amount of weight. Okay. Then maybe we reset what they're doing, or we keep doing what they're doing and change the rep scheme. Maybe we were doing 10s. Maybe now we're going to go down to 5s on the main movement, and we're going to keep the accessory movement, you know, maybe 8 to 10, right? And we're going to do it in a way, if they're an athlete, depending on what we're trying to do with them, the tempo is going to be totally different than if it's a bodybuilder or somebody who's trying to put as much muscle on as possible. Somebody who's trying to put as much muscle on as possible, it's going to be more controlled and slow. Someone who's an explosive athlete, who's like somebody who's doing, like say somebody who's a football player, he's going to, if their goal is to build that power, they're going to be doing, very fast, explosive reps, like a dynamic effort type thing. You can use medicine balls that, you can use things like the hammer jammer. You can do dynamic push-ups like that, all sorts of different things. So there's different tools for the job. There's so much information to cover. It's almost impossible to cover all of it. But if you understand the principles, okay, what does this person really need? Like me, say I wanted to start competing again, say in wrestling, right? Say I wanted to get back into wrestling. Would I need to do more maximum strength? No. I'm already playing. I would need to do more strength endurance. I'd need to work on my technique. I'd need to basically, most of my conditioning would be actually drilling, wrestling. I would want to do lots of things like Jacob's ladder. And that's where there's different testing. Joel Jameson gets into this. One of the things I look at is like when I'm watching somebody train, like how much are they huffing and puffing? Are they breathing hard, just doing simple things? If I know that, then I need their aerobic engine, their aerobic base needs to get bigger. How hard do they have to work just to exist? And that's where, extended warm-ups come in. That's where walking outside comes in, because everything gets easier if you have a little bit of an aerobic engine. So there's just a few thoughts. Dan, I appreciate you contributing and jumping in. But here's a few thoughts for you. Get on the webinar or get in the lesson tomorrow. I'm going to go into a lot more detail. I mean, there's lots of great beginner strength training programs. Like my friend Jim Windler has a great program called 531. The only thing I would do is with like field athletes, I would just replace something like, the regular barbell squats with the safety squat bar squat. I would replace like the overhead press with a landmine press for field athletes or people that throw. But, 3 or 4 years of basic fundamental lifting is going to help just about anybody, as long as you're not turning them into a power lifter. That would be wise for just about anyone. And gymnastics is one of my favorite foundational activities, because and all kids, I think, should take gymnastics, because it teaches you to move in a full range of motion in all joints and control that full range of motion. Because there's nothing inherently wrong with extension. There's nothing inherently wrong with flexion. The problem is when you get stuck in either one of those things and you can't go the other direction, or you don't have the ability to switch back and forth, or you don't have the ability to control that and manage that strategy, right? That's when you get into trouble. So have yourself a great day. Get on our email list, stillmanwellness.com, so you can get in on the lesson tomorrow. You'll get an email tonight. And then Saturday, the link's down below. It's on my YouTube channel. It's on Dr. Stillman's YouTube channel. Tune into that. We'll get into a lot more detail on that. So have yourself a great day. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you get yourself outside, even though it's probably cold as hell. It's not cold as hell. Cold is whatever slang term you want to use for it. But appreciate you tuning in, and have yourself a great day.